Hi, Josette. So I went to your channel, and I thought, oh, she's a qualified nurse, so I'm not going to worry. I'm in good hands. I think you are a nice person to open the door for people to do this. I found you through my friend Thomas, Redknapp28. So I saw his reply first because I wanted to watch his videos. I thought, well, I want to find the video that he answered, and then I found yours, and I think I've played every role on the planet. I didn't work in a convenience store. I never worked in a grocery store. I worked everywhere else. Fire service, I was a firefighter. That was my primary thing. Then I went into prevention, and I enjoyed that. It involved a lot of teaching, and I enjoyed that. And from fire prevention, I went to occupational safety and health. So I have no regrets whatsoever. I've enjoyed my work life. I always wanted to work, so I always looked for a part-time job. I really enjoyed working. In fact, when I was young, my mother was the base librarian on an Air Force installation in the United States, so I was there quite frequently. I often volunteered as a library aide. I suppose you could say that was my first job. I was volunteer, and I was young, but I was checking out books. I was meeting people, all the various ranks, from generals on down, and everybody comes from the library at one point or another. So I learned how to shelve books. I can't go to a library to this day without... Once I got stuck in a library for 2 hours because they didn't go around and, you have to go on a regular basis and make sure all those books are in order. So I went in a public library one day and I went looking for a specific book, and I couldn't find it, and it was way over somewhere where it was not supposed to be. And I saw what a mess those shelves were in, and I just stayed right there. Oh, God, it was terrible. You can't, once you're familiar with the Dewey Decimal System, you can't go in a library like that, after that. It'll make you crazy. I must have been there for 2 hours. I just thought, oh, I have to do this. Somebody's got to do this. And after all that time, I'd done a good bit of work, and nobody came over and said, what are you doing, or anything. And all of a sudden I thought, what am I doing? This is not my job. So that is the true story. I can't go in libraries anymore unless they're on top of that. And my dad was big into volunteerism, so I suppose we played a lot of roles that way too. And we would help in the election, the voting, when people walk through and they pass out the various pamphlets and whatnot. So I would go with him to do that. And he would go to the nearest donut place, like Krispy Kreme Donuts, and buy donuts for everybody. And that was a bipartisan effort. He was just buy donuts for everybody. It doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter if you need a donut. My first job was in a bicycle shop. I put bicycles together. You don't want to know all the jobs I've had. I have to skip over most of them because I've always had a part-time job. I got a job as a receptionist in an optician's store, and it was boring. So finally I went to my boss one day, and I said, can I do something else? This is nuts. Can I do something else? Well, okay, so he taught me how to take lenses. We would get round uncut lenses that would come in. And so our job, the optician's, the benchman's job would be to cut the lens down to fit in the frame, blah, blah, blah. But they would come in round uncut form. So when they would come in, somebody would have to check the prescription to make sure the prescription was accurate. And so he taught me how to do that. He taught me how to use a piece of equipment called a lensometer. And he taught me how to do that. So, okay, I started doing that. And then he saw that I was working out, and he taught me a little bit more. And he taught me a little bit more. And he taught me a little bit more. I apprenticed. Not officially. Before it was all over, I was doing everything in there. Not the complicated prescriptions, but I could make a pair of eyeglasses from start to finish. And I did so many times. And so I did that for 5 years. And that was the great, and I wasn't even expecting, I just got a job as a receptionist. And all that came out of it because I had a very, very good boss. And it was useful for him for me to know more. So that there was that, my value. And then my mother came to me one day and she said she had symptoms that I knew were symptoms of colon cancer. And she'd waited too long. She wanted to die at home, so I guess I stepped into the role of caregiver. I'm glad I did, because she wanted to talk about dying, and I found out through the years that most people are uncomfortable with that, and I can understand why. And my best part-time job was in a nature store where they sold bird feeders and bird seeds to cater to your backyard birds. So I bought almost every book on the shelf. I never got a paycheck. It just went right back to the store. That was fine. And I've got about 5 bird feeders now. You know, it led to other nature experiences. I started a nature program for children with disabilities in my hometown with 2 men. One was a recreation specialist and the chief naturalist. So the 3 of us put our heads together and mapped out a program, and it ran for about 5 or 6 years, and then they lost city funding. I was not involved after the first few months, and it wasn't meant to be. I was just going to be on the ground floor. But I felt very good that program ran for as long as it did. I don't know, I've had so many roles. Married Air Force, kept working, but we entertained. I stepped in the role of the homemaker, and I enjoyed that. Fire department, right. We were running a call, and they had to dump a building, evacuate the building. So I don't even remember, it might have been me or somebody else, laid out the supply line, you know, the 4-inch line they run to the hydrant. Okay, so did we charge that line? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Anyway, so all these people had evacuated the building, and they were pretty much next to the fire engine. And it was all over, but they were still out of the building. And I said, okay, I'll rack the hose back up. So I'm racking the hose, and that's what I'm paying attention to. I'm not paying attention to these people. And I finished racking the hose, and I did my little thing that I had to do in the hydrant wrench, and I tied it all up there. And then I stood up. And I had my bunker pants on, and I still had my coat on. And there were all these people who had evacuated the building, and they were all looking at me. I was entertainment for these people. So I curtsied. And they applauded. And I loved that moment, so that was the coolest. That was great fun. They applauded. You know, you're just not going to hear about a thing like that ever again. And I would walk by the engine in the morning, and I would do that on the side. Yeah. Good life, good work life. I don't know, I've had so many roles. Now I kind of stick to myself because it's easier. It just seems like most people are not attached to the highest truth. It just seems like they're attached to bending the facts to fit what they want the truth to be. And, you know, you can find yourself really alone. Nobody to talk with. Okay. Josette, it was nice to meet you. I do think you're a good person. So it was nice meeting you, and I hope you're enjoying life. Yeah. Okay.